Hello guys, so in our last video we created our domain controller and our first Windows domain, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create users in domain and add computers to your domain, to your Windows domain setting. As always, here is the text on my blog, so if you don't understand me very well or I'm going too fast, this is the place where you can look up everything that I'm going to talk about today in this video. So let's get started. So before we begin, there are a few prerequisites that we need to meet. We need to install first 2 new virtual machines. These 2 new machines will need to have Windows 10 Professional at least on them. So here is the setup of one of my machines. I name it SB Client 1, the other one is SB Client 2. Also both machines have fixed IP addresses. Okay, let's go here. So SB Client 1 has 10.0051 and SB Client 2 has 10.0052. Both have the same subnet mask, of course, default gateway, and the DNS server needs to be 10.0031. That's the IP address of our domain controller, of our Active Directory. So your client machines need to have DNS server of our Active Directory machine. So IP address of Active Directory needs to be on DNS server on our client machines. You can have these Windows 10 installations also as evaluation software on Evaluation Center Microsoft. I already went through this on my first video ever on how to install Windows Server 2019. The same principle goes for Windows 10, so you can watch that video and repeat the procedure if you need to download Windows 10 and install it. So more or less these are the prerequisites for our lab. Also, before we go any further, make sure that these 3 machines can communicate. So these are again some basic stuff we already went through. So make sure that all of the 3 machines have the same virtual switch attached. Mine is external 1. So this machine has IP address 10.0031, this has 10.0051, and this one has 10.0052. So if I go to our Active Directory machine, go to command prompt. Okay, run as administrator, I didn't have to do this, but anyways, and go to ping 10.0051. Okay, domain controller can see our client 1 and if we go 10.0052 and enter ping, okay, so our domain controller sees both machines. If for some reason ping doesn't work, that means that something is wrong with your network and machines won't communicate, or you just need to go, let's say, to client 1 control panel, Windows Defender Firewall, Advanced Settings, Inbound Rules, wait a little bit, and find File and Print and Sharing, Echo Request, it's MP4 in, and right click, okay. Now it offers me disable, but if it's disabled you will get something like this, enable rule. So if this was disabled, I will have this here enable rule button, and once it's enabled you have this green circle with check mark in it. So if the ping doesn't work, enable ping and check if it works. If it doesn't work, make sure your network works before you go further, because communication between clients and Active Directory is mandatory for this tutorial and for your network in general. If you are to do this in production, that's the main thing you have to assure before you go any further. We will stay on our Active Directory virtual machine, head on to Start, Windows Administrative Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers. Okay, once Active Directory users and computers open, expand your domain. We already created informatical.local domain, and you will see a bunch of default organizational units inside of it. Since we are starting, maybe you can imagine these organizational units as folders on your disks. So if you want to organize something, you will put that in one folder. By default, there is a users organizational unit. There are a bunch of users and even groups. Also in domain controllers, there is one machine that's our domain controller, and other things are empty. Since I assume you are new in this, make sure that if you are starting with the Active Directory, also as with everything else, you start managing it the right way immediately. So don't just put everything inside users. So later on, especially if you are working in the large environment, you will just be lost in the bunch of accounts and groups, and everything will be messed up here. So what we are going to do, we are going to organize this from the start. Let's imagine we have two departments in our small company. One is development and one is sales. Development will code our product and sales will sell it. So we have two departments, and we will create two organizational units for our two departments. We will make a right click on informatiker.local domain and select new organizational unit, and we will create organizational unit named development. We will also select to protect container from accidental deletion, because if you have many objects in your Active Directory and you in older versions, you could delete parts of your Active Directory by chance, by wrongly selecting delete, and that will be a horrible mess. Microsoft implemented this checkbox, so it's very useful. Make sure it stays checked. So we will create organizational unit named development. Okay, we are seeing our new organizational unit appeared here, and we will make one more, and we will name it new organizational unit. We will name it sales. So there it is. We created development and we created sales. We will manage our users through these two organizational units. You can also do this for computer. You can do this whichever way you find fit and makes logic for you. So it doesn't have to be this way, but in the lab we are learning how to create organizational units, users, and adding computers. So this is the way we are going to do this here. So we successfully created our first two organizational units, and now we are going to add some users to our development and sales organizational units. Okay, so after we are done with the organizational units, now we will put our user into these organizational units. So let's say in our development department there are two employees. First one will go to the development organizational unit, right click, new user. Our first employee is Anna P. User logon name, so the logon name for the machine that she is going to use is going to be anna.p@informatiker.local. I'm seeing the same mistake in a lot of companies I worked with. In the end, every new company starts as small, so they usually end up just adding a name as a username or as an email. And if the company grows in time, you'll have a very large problem by just adding usernames as a name, as a person's name for your domain or email, because you can imagine why. You will have a few people with the same name, and then what? You will have generic Anna1 or what? So the best practice would be to use first and the second, first and the last name, not first and second, first and the last name, or something like that. So you can make sure you can distinguish your users on the domain, and the users themselves will feel much better if they are addressed by their first and last name, or not just as a first name or with number or something like that. So the first name Anna, last name P. Anna.p is a user login name. Let's select next. Password. Okay, password never expires, so we'll select it like this. Let's give her a password. Next. Finish. Okay, so we have our first employee of development department inside development organizational unit. So this is the logic. I hope you can see now where I'm getting to. I will now repeat this for 3 more users, and I will slightly fast forward this. So the second user for development will be Eva M, and the users in sales or employees in sales are Steve and Stefan. So let's open them up. First, another one in development. Right click, new user. Okay, so that's that. We created our users, so added our employees to our development and the sales organizational units. And now we will go ahead. Let me just check with my blog. Okay, we will now go ahead and add our client computers to our domain. Let's now go away from our domain controller machine, from our Active Directory, and head on to client 1. I will show you the whole procedure of adding a computer to the domain on the client 1. I will make also that procedure on client 2 and fast forward it. Just client 1 will be made in detail so you can see the procedure, how it goes. So the easiest way is to go to the control panel, system. Before we start adding this client to our domain, make sure that you follow everything from the beginning of this video. So make sure that you gave your client computer some meaningful name. Also make sure you fix your IP address if you don't have DHCP, and specify as a DNS server the IP address of your Active Directory, otherwise this procedure won't work. So when you are done with that, also make sure that network is working so that your domain controller and your clients can communicate. After you've done all of that, go ahead to the control panel, system. On this screen, select change settings and go to the computer name tab, change. Okay, computer name stays as it is. Now by default every Windows computer is part of the workgroup. Also, maybe it's worth mentioning, Windows Professional and Windows Enterprise versions can be added to domain. Windows Home version cannot be added to domain. So make sure when you're planning your domain that you have Windows 10 Professional as licensing model at least. So we will select member of domain. We create a domain named informatiker.local. Okay. Okay, so everything is okay with our setup. So we got this screen, computer name, domain changes. You need to enter here username and password of your domain administrator. Our domain administrator, if you followed my tutorials from the beginning, is info admin. So I will now enter the name of my domain, which is informatiker. Okay, and then make /info/admin and enter the password for our domain. This is domain administrator. This is the main administrator of our Active Directory machine and Active Directory as a service. So when you enter that username and password, okay, now we will wait. welcome to the informatical.local domain. So we successfully joined our client machine to our domain. Let's select OK, close, and restart now. While our client machine is rebooting, let's head back to our Active Directory virtual machine and head on to computers and refresh computers. You see here, so SB client 1 is now added to domain as a computer. And now, since we added that computer to domain, we will log our user Anna P to that machine and start managing that client machine from our domain controller. It will be great. You will see in the following videos what you can do with the Active Directory and with the domain on Windows. Okay, so let's select this. Admin stays on the client machine. So the local user you created on that machine, on the client machine you created, it stays on that machine. So whenever and if you need at some point your local account, you can still log onto your local account. We will now add the domain account to this machine. Domain account will not be local administrator by default on this client machine. We'll go through the procedure of adding domain account as a local only, not a domain administrator on the client machine in future videos. For now, we are just going to log as another user. We will select again domain is Informatiker. Anna.p is a username. So now we will sign into Informatiker domain as a user Anna.p. We will enter her password and select enter. And now that is that. So we will log in our domain user to this client machine. Just to try to explain to you, if you are really entirely completely new to this whole thing, to the Windows Server, to all these services, Active Directory, as I already said, is at foundation of every enterprise, and you will set Active Directory as a first service when you are into a serious enterprise production environment. Then you will build the services on it by adding computers and users firstly into domain, then creating some rules for these machines or users, adding services to them like file shares, databases, email services. All of these services will be tied to your Active Directory. So this is important first step, and you need to add your computer and create users on the domain, which will then log on to these client machines, and so you can go further and manage the services on these client machines. Okay, so this video is getting a bit long. Let's just quickly wrap this up. So I added two computers to our created domain, client 1 and client 2, which are Windows 10 machines. Client 1 belonging to development department, and Anna P is logged onto that machine, and client 2 is belonging to sales department, and Stefan is logged onto that machine. So with these steps we learn how to create organizational units, development and sales, add users to our Active Directory, and add computers to our Active Directory. These are all basic steps that we are going to build on in further videos. And that's more or less it for this video. Hope you liked it. Have a nice day. Bye bye.